In 1903, two workmen clearing a drainage channel inside a Somerset cave struck a skull with their picks. As they cleared the sediment from the floor, they revealed a nearly complete skeleton, curled in the dark and preserved by the cool limestone. The discovery was named Cheddar Man. Forensics identified him as a male in his 20s, living 10,000 years ago during the Mesolithic period. This era was defined by the retreat of the last ice age. Massive meltwater floods carved out the deep gorge above the cave, while the frozen permafrost forced the water to rush across the surface, cutting the cliffs that now dominate the Somerset landscape. Because he was the oldest near-complete human remains found on the island, Cheddar Man became the primary visual reference for the first modern Britons. For over a century, his bones were displayed in museums, and his likeness appeared on educational posters. But without genetic data, every depiction of his physical appearance was an educated guess. Artists and scientists assumed that because he lived in Northern Europe, he must have resembled a modern white European, usually depicted with light skin and rough, unkempt hair. That assumption stood until 2018, when a team of researchers finally sequenced his genome. They replaced a century of speculation with direct evidence of the actual pigmentation of Britain's oldest inhabitants. 10,000 years ago, Britain was not an island. It was the western edge of Doggerland, a plain connecting to mainland Europe. Cheddar Man's people were hunter-gatherers who walked this plain. As sea levels rose, Doggerland was inundated, and Britain became an isolated island. Inside Gough's cave, the environmental conditions were uniquely suited for preservation. The stable temperature, moderate humidity, and high mineral content of the water effectively stopped the biological decay of organic material. While bone laid in open ground usually vanishes, this cave acted as a biological vault. It held his DNA in a state of preservation rarely matched anywhere else in Britain. In 2018, scientists from the Natural History Museum and University College London drilled a 2-millimeter hole into the skull to extract his nuclear DNA. They targeted the petrous bone, the densest structure in the human body. Its extreme density acts as a vault, protecting the fragile genetic material from environmental contamination and biological degradation for thousands of years. The results contradicted every previous illustration. Genetic markers showed Cheddar Man had dark curly hair, blue eyes, and skin pigmentation described as dark to black. This finding clarified the timing of European evolution. Light skin was not an ancient adaptation to low sunlight in the north. It was a much more recent development, brought to Europe thousands of years later by Neolithic farmers from Anatolia. This genome provided the first concrete evidence that the first Britons were dark-skinned hunter-gatherers, a population that existed long before the light-skinned Northern European of the modern imagination emerged. Looking at the broader genetic history of Britain, Cheddar Man's people did not simply evolve into the modern population. About 6,000 years ago, incoming farmers from continental Europe triggered a near-total population replacement. The original hunter-gatherers were largely swept aside. Their genetic contribution to modern Britons is a residual fraction, roughly 10% of the current genetic substrate. To trace a specific link across this demographic shift, scientists look at mitochondrial DNA. This genetic code is inherited exclusively from the mother, passing from daughter to daughter across generations. Given the scale of the population replacement that occurred after the Mesolithic, the probability of finding a direct maternal descendant in the same geographic area 10,000 years later is statistically low. In 1997, a team led by Oxford professor Brian Sykes sequenced a portion of Cheddar Man's mitochondrial DNA. They then compared it to samples taken from 20 long-term residents of the local village. The comparison revealed a match. Adrian Target, a history teacher at a school just half a mile from the cave, carried a mitochondrial sequence that differed from the 10,000-year-old skeleton by only a single genetic letter. While a match only proves a shared maternal ancestor, finding this lineage in the same Somerset Valley suggests a remarkable thread of regional continuity. It represents a chain of roughly 300 mothers and daughters that persisted through the inundation of Doggerland and the arrival of farming. Ancient DNA has clarified that our ancestors looked very different from what we once assumed. But despite migrations and population shifts, Some biological threads have remained unbroken in the same square mile of Earth for 10,000 years.